Tider.com, Tider Insider TV. And he joins us every Monday here on the Bud Light Hotline, powered by Adams Beverages. Rodney, Alabama beats Mississippi State 38-7, up 35-7 at halftime. A good win for Alabama. I thought the defense might have had its best overall game of the season. But clearly all that is playing second fiddle in terms to what happened in the game late in the second quarter when Tua Tagovailoa suffered that hip injury, which has ended his season. And immediately in this country, we start looking for someone to blame when something negative like that happens. And I said earlier, and I'm wondering if you agree with me, I don't think anyone is to blame. I don't think Nick Saban's to blame. I certainly don't think Tua's to blame for wanting to play. I don't think his family is to blame. I just think it's an unfortunate football injury that occurred. Nick Saban went over it in the postgame. They watched him in the warm-ups. He moved great. He passed all the tests that they needed to see from him. He wanted to play in the game. I think they wanted him to play in the game because they were concerned about winning a football game. And unfortunately, it happened. There's been some discussion that maybe he shouldn't have been out there for that last series, but it could have happened on the first series. He played great. Alabama's offense looked unstoppable, and then the injury occurred. So while it's so disappointing for everyone, I think this looking for someone to blame is just misplaced anger, in my opinion. I'm wondering what you think.
Yeah, well, again, he was cleared medically to play. He looked fine out there playing. He did a tremendous job, as you said. I think some people probably think, well, you're up 35-7. There's 2.5, 3 minutes left, 4 minutes left in the half. Why not go ahead and pull him out at that point? Well, first of all, again, he was playing well. He wasn't showing no indication that, he was, lingering effects from the injury. And another thing, this wasn't about trying to do something selfish. In other words, we're not leaving Tua out there so we can, rack up his statistics for the Heisman, whatever it is. The point for him to go back out there was to continue to improve as a team. They had an opportunity in the 2-minute offense. They wanted to, build upon whatever for the future in that particular phase of the game. Let's work on our 2-minute drill. So this was something that they were looking to make improvement on. This was an opportunity. And again, Gary, I just don't think you can play the game of football and try to do it successfully around injuries. You can't prevent injuries. Yes, you have to use good judgment. But I don't see why that was, necessarily bad judgment there on Nick Saban's part for allowing him to go back in. Because really, when you look at it, it wasn't even an injury that he had already had. It had nothing to do with the previous injury. So
that's right.
I think you have to protect the players to an extent. But, you can't walk around any player and just say, well, this guy's injury prone, so we can't put him out there, or we can't, we need to pull him out. I think you just have to play the game sometimes. So I don't think that anyone, like you said, could be blamed.
Also, I've even seen some criticism of Tua for not throwing the ball away. I look at it like this, and it's clearly like Saban would have taken him out of the game if he knew he was going to get hurt. I bet you Tua would have thrown the ball away if he'd known he was going to get hurt. In that second, you're a playmaker trying to make a play. He'd been making them the entire game. I use the comparison of a three-point shooter where you come down and maybe there's a guy open on the wing and you pass up the pass because you want to take a 25-foot contested three-point shot because you believe you can make it. That's what playmakers do. They try to make plays. Again, it was unfortunate. It was a tough hit. He got driven to the ground. There's no doubt why he got injured. He landed on that hip. But at that moment, it's easy for us to sit in the press box or on television and say, throw the ball away. He's got a split second. He may not even know how close somebody was to being from behind him. He's trying to extend the play, as you said, working on the 2-minute, trying to make a play in the game. And the injury occurred. So I just think it was a football play. He was trying to make a play. The Mississippi State defenders were trying to make a play. As you said, that's what happens in football. It's unfortunate, but there's nothing that anybody can do about it.
Well, I think probably the one area where Tua may need to improve would be that what you're talking about is getting rid of the ball. I think sometimes he does try to extend the plays, and that's just him, the competitor in him. That's the kind of player he is. And guess what? Sometimes he extends those plays, and you see what happens. Big plays occur for Alabama. But, I think sometimes he could protect himself a little bit better by getting rid of the ball. I do know when he bailed out, given the circumstances, you go, and again, Tua's thinking as a competitor. He's not thinking like I'm thinking. Okay, but I'm thinking here, Tua, you got this injury, you've had this injury. Let's not take any chances. As soon as you start bailing out, ditch the ball, get rid of it. I'm actually thinking to myself, get rid of it, Tua, get rid of it. That's the things I'm thinking about because I see these guys closing in. Again, did he sense that they were as close as they were? I have no idea. It's easy to say these things, but I do think the one thing that he could help himself with is by being able to, concentrate, focus on, hey, sometimes let's just get rid of the ball and live to the next play.
Rodney Orr with us from TiderInsider.com and Tider Insider TV. All right, I've said this a couple of times today. One advantage that Tua Tagovailoa has that maybe many people in this country wouldn't have is he has the finest medical professionals in their field in the world to help him get better, starting with the Andrews Sports Medicine Institute with Dr. Kane and Dr. Andrews. Now he's been flown to Houston or being flown to Houston today for the surgical procedure with one of the top hip surgeons in the world. And I think he's going to have a full recovery. And I base that, Rodney, and you and I are in the media. We know how these universities and doctors go to great lengths to craft these letters in a way that if they have any doubt about someone, they want to make sure that they craft that letter where they don't overspeak. And the fact that Dr. Kane said in the letter Saturday night that he expects a full recovery, and he said in the letter last night, again, that he expects a full recovery, that tells me that they feel like Tua is going to be fine long-term to play football again. Am I reading too much into that, or is that the way you take it as well?
No, actually, yeah, I was talking to someone else about it, and the way they put these things together, attorney friend of mine, and, the way they put these statements together. And I was saying, what does full recovery really mean? What are they referring to? And, exactly to what extent does that mean he can come back and play football? And the feeling is that's exactly what it means, that, they fully expect him to be able to come back and, resume doing what he's been doing, So, whether that's, and that may be another question, whether that's back at Alabama or moving on to the NFL remains to be seen. But, the feeling is that really what they're saying is they expect him to be able to step back on that football field at some point.
Let me ask you this, Rod. Let's say, and I'm just throwing this number out there, let's say it's a 6-month process before he can start throwing football or do anything in that regard. That would be May of next year. That would be post-draft. And I know he and his family and his, folks that are going to be advising them in regards to his professional career will have to get together. I don't think there's any doubt in my mind, at least, that he was going to turn pro after this season. I mean, he had a chance to be the overall number 1 draft pick or certainly one of the top 2 or 3, 4 picks in the draft. This could change that to some degree. He does have a wild card, so to speak, in that he could return to college if he wanted to. If there is doubt about his football playing ability, that's an option that I think will be on the table to come back to Alabama for another year, prove that he's healthy, and then replenish his draft stock. Now, that's to say if he wants to do that, and he may wind up being a high pick anyway if everybody knows he's going to be well. But I'm just saying I think that is on the table. Would you agree with that statement?
For sure. I mean, I think all options are still on the table. Again, we'll have to see how it plays out. Really, I don't know that anyone knows, me, you, media, whatever, the exact extent of this injury, how long the recovery process will take, and, what all it will entail, and all of these things. I just still think it's kind of early, at least based on what we know, to make any sort of projections. But, we could see him come back, or, like you said, Gary, again, will it hurt his draft stock? I could not imagine that it wouldn't have some sort of impact to some extent. it makes it less likely to me, as I'm thinking that he would be a, top 2-3 pick right now, just based on what we know. And but again, he could still easily be a first-round pick, and if that's the case, then you would expect that he would go to the NFL. But again, it's just, to me, I know people want to know answers right now. You got to make speculation and all that stuff. I just don't know how anyone can really do that at this point.
Short term, Alabama's got 2 football games left to play in this regular season, and then at least one in the postseason. This game against Western Carolina, I think there's no perfect scenario for an injury like that to Tua, but for Mac Jones, this is probably perfect scenario. He gets to go out and play against a team that Alabama is superior to in every phase of the game, to help get himself ready and prepared for what he's going to face in 12 days at Jordan-Hare Stadium. So in the short term, Mac Jones is the guy. It's his team. Tua Tagovailoa moves up to the backup role. They both, I'm sure, will split reps these first couple of days of practice before they start preparing Mac Jones to be the starter on Saturday. I wouldn't be surprised one bit if Tua plays a lot in that game, because you got to get yourself – there's no Tua now. You got to get yourself ready to play against Auburn at Jordan-Hare Stadium 12 days from today.
Yeah, and again, there's one thing for sure. Nick Saban is he's been through it all. He's been through every scenario. He's been in championship games when your quarterback went down. Rohan Davey, remember, at LSU?
Sure.
And they had to insert a freshman, even though he was an aged freshman, a former pro baseball player, Matt Mock, if you remember that situation.
I remember it well. I remember him replacing Jalen Hurts, who had lost one game in his career at halftime of the national championship game with Tua to win that game.
Yeah.
Tua went down in the SEC championship game last year. Yeah.
He's been in every situation. He's experienced. So I have a little doubt that he'll put Mac Jones and Talia in the best situations over the next 2 weeks to prepare for what they have in the future with the games coming up. So there's no question that, again, you're talking about, and if we want to skip past Western Carolina and look at Auburn real quickly, it's a tough situation to go in there with a quarterback with limited experience, and especially one going that's never really started a game on the road at all, which is what Alabama's going to do with Mac Jones, we assume. And so there's certainly a tough task ahead for Alabama to prepare for this, the upcoming games that they're going to have, I think. So, but again, Nick Saban is as good as there is.
Lost in the Tua injury is the fact that Alabama's defense might have played its best game of the season, Rodney. They held Mississippi State in the first half to under 100 yards of offense. Wouldn't have had that much had it been not for a couple of personal fouls that extended drives when they had stops on third down. Held them to 7 points in the game. Coming off that LSU fiasco, I thought that was a nice statement by the Alabama defense against a pretty good offensive football team, Mississippi State.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought they played much better. I mean, listen, had it not been for a few penalties and a couple other things, I think Alabama's defensively, they would have probably produced, I don't know how many 3-and-outs there were in the game. To be honest with you, this thing with Tua has pretty much taken all my time up the last couple of days. So, but I know that they defensively produced several 3-and-outs and could have had several more had they not had self-inflicted wounds. So I thought that was real encouraging. They had some more injuries. DJ Dale, who apparently will be okay. Raekwon Davis, not totally sure what the extent of that injury is. Guess we'll find out here in a little bit with Nick Saban. So that they're more beat up, even more beat up than they were on that defensive side. It's going to be interesting to see how many freshmen start against Auburn on defense. I mean, conceivably, you could have a, all true freshman defensive line and inside backers. I mean, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but it is possible. You could have Dale and Byron Young and, Boybe's playing a lot, even though Byron Young and Boybe basically play the same position. Fadarian Mathis, again, a sophomore on that defensive front. But This is a beat up football team on the defensive side, and as a whole, somebody said, Gary, that heading into the season, you look at where they are now, they've lost 30% of their starters.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and to be 9-1 and still talking about having a chance to make the playoffs, that's pretty phenomenal.
I said the same thing earlier in the show. I said, when you look at what this football team has gone through, to be 9-1 and still be in the talks for the college football playoff at this point in the season, it's really a phenomenal year. And Nick Saban continues to prove why he's the best coach in college football. All right, before we end the segment, I know, like you said, everything's kind of been a little, everything else is kind of taken second place to what's happened with Tua. But any recruiting tidbits out there as far as Alabama stands? I know this will be the final home game coming up Saturday, the final opportunity to host recruits for a football game. Anything out there that you're hearing on the recruiting front?
Not really. Nothing new. I mean, it's, basically been in a holding pattern, I think. We're coming up on this stretch run. They want to close out on several guys. Again, we've talked about they need a wide receiver. They need a tight end. We've named a lot of those guys. They may take a third running back. We know certainly they want a defensive lineman. McKinley Jackson is a guy that's extremely high on their board. There's only a few spots left, Gary. They just need to close this thing out. And I think, as we move forward here over the next few weeks, some of these guys are going to extend their recruitment into February now. So, we'll just have to kind of see how it plays out.
Also, Rodney, just coming through that Alabama and Auburn, no surprise here, the Iron Bowl will be a 2:30 kick on CBS a week from Saturday. Some people have speculated it might be an ESPN nighttime kick, but CBS has opted for the Iron Bowl again in that 2:30 Central Time slot for their CBS game of the week. All right, Rodney, great stuff. Keep the listeners informed on how they can become a Tighter Insider member and get all your updates.
TighterInsider.com. It's only $48 a year. You can get access with your credit card, or if you prefer, there's an address there to send a check, and gives you all the premium information as well as, the forum where, it's just been nonstop, Gary. It is, it's just been crazy since Saturday.
I know it has. Thank you, Rodney.
All right, buddy.